Hello, lovely, lovely BBs. I'm actually really nervous about this guest that we have here. I don't know why, but I remember about a week ago I went onto Instagram and there's this really great program called Key Change that's offered in the EU and in Canada, and they were featuring Vick Bain, and I was like, I know this woman. 8 years ago, I think we established I was a member of the British Academy of Songwriters, Composers and Authors, otherwise known as BASCA, and that's where I first met Vic. And I remember seeing this woman who was in a leadership position, in a highly authoritative position, and being actually struck by how surprising it was that I saw a woman in power. And that was 8 years ago, and so this was a really big flashback for me. So I got in touch with Vic, and Vic so graciously said that she would join us today. So we're going to have an amazing conversation about so many things that are probably going to bring up all these emotions. If you've worked in the creative fields, if you've worked in any field that is male dominated, this is a conversation that is going to probably make all of us a little bit uncomfortable. But thankfully, the fact that we are sitting here having this conversation means that it is not the same as it was, and that it's only going to get better. This is my wishful thinking. So Vic, I'm going to do a quick introduction, and then we're going to just get into it. Welcome. Vic has worked in the music industry for 25 years. For 6 years, she was Chief Executive Officer of the British Academy of Songwriters, Composers and Authors, the Ivors Academy, and is a Sheffield University BA graduate, Music and Performing Arts, and Henley Business School MBA graduate, who is also about to start a PhD. So we'll talk about that later. We're all nerds here. Everyone is a happy nerd. She is the author of an influential industry report counting the music industry, and founder of the F-List Directory of UK Female Musicians, which is a not-for-profit organization aimed at facilitating professional opportunities for women in music. Vic was enrolled into the Music Week Women in Music Awards Roll of Honor and the BBC Radio 4 Women's Hour Music Industry Powerlist. Vic is also a director of the board of the Incorporated Society of Musicians, a music tech startup called Delic, and a trustee of Parents and Carers in Performing Arts. So, classic underachieving human being as usual. And now you live not in London, and you travel up to London. You're in a beautiful part of England. So Vic, welcome.
Thank you so much, and thank you for reaching out. It was such a lovely surprise to get your message last week. I was like, oh, I remember Christina, yeah, and I wanted to know how your music career was going.
Oh, well, we can talk about that. It's going. We talk about being a hybrid artist a lot and a hybrid creative. But yeah, wrote the album last year and had a bunch of releases and it's just moving onwards and upwards, as well as the acting and all entertainment things. So this is one of the things that I get really kind of like sweaty about is thinking about the start of my music career. Because I did have, I've spoken about this, and I had a producer that, that Vic knows, that was really great, and not one song was released. And there were a lot of hoops that both of us were jumping through, and we've talked about it a lot. People try their absolute best, but the industry is just, it can chew you up so quickly and easily. And it doesn't always, but it can. And one of the other major issues is navigating it as a gender minority. And for me, as a woman walking in and wanting to have a dual career and wanting to be someone who is not just known as a pop artist, but someone who is actually affecting social change, has been a real struggle for the last decade of my life. So I'm going to pass this back to Vic, though, and say, tell us about how and where you grew up and what drew you into this music industry in the first place.
Well, actually, I was born in the northeast of England, and lived in a very industrial town called Gateshead for 8 years, and that was a very working class area. My family were very poor. My dad came from very poor circumstances, but he worked very hard, and we moved away when I was 8, and he was getting better jobs. So then we moved to rural Oxfordshire, and you couldn't imagine a more different environment. And really, I think that was very powerful impact and influence on who I was. And I moved around a bit more. I lived with relatives in America, went to high school in Florida for a while. So when I went back to England, I was very determined that, and I'd had some creative drama and acting and music experiences in Florida. Got in with a really great gang of very creative people who, and some of them are my closest friends right now, and we've all pursued creative careers. So when I got back to England, I was really determined to get into the music industry somehow. But my family were like, "There's no way you are. There's no way. People like us, we don't have careers like that. That's not going to pay your bills. You are never going to get a job or make any money from music." So there were a
Wow.
lot of barriers.
What an interesting phrase. I had to note that phrase in my mind. People like us don't have careers like that.
Mm,
Because as someone from an Asian culture and coming from Hong Kong, which is, not doesn't really value performing arts or music based careers either. People like us don't have careers like that is a really interesting. That's a very interesting phrase. Carry on,
And
please.
and there's been lots of recent research in the UK showing how few people from working class backgrounds pursue careers in the UK music industry. So there's an amazing academic called Dr. Dave O'Brien, who's based in, I think I can't remember if it's Glasgow or Edinburgh University, but Dr. Dave O'Brien produces amazing research that shows there are hundreds of thousands of people missing from the creative industries from working class backgrounds. And in fact, musicians are from very privileged backgrounds. So I had to take a very roundabout route really to break into music. When I moved to London in the mid 90s, I had no network, no connections, no what we call social capital, and it took a very long time to break in. And especially because I found myself a single mother of twins
Wow.
in 99
Wow, I didn't know that at
1999.
all. How did I not know that at all?
So that just became, something else I had to I had to deal with in breaking into the music industry. So yeah, I didn't sort of walk straight into a great internship in a record label or something like that. But I think it probably gave me tenacity and perseverance and a lot of determination.
So when you went into the music industry, what happened? Like you just had these babies?
Well, I had a few years in London before I had my kids, and I was really just finding my feet. So I worked in a chain of secondhand record stores, which are actually sort of quite famous or quite infamous in the music industry in London. The music and video exchange shops, which were, I think there was about 16 of them at the time, and it was a place where lots of people who were in bands, people who wanted to be
Hmm.
DJs, people who wanted to break into the industry. You kind of did your time in the MVE shops before
Wow.
before you got your job. And so I worked there for the first year, and there were about 120 regulars on the staffing roster, and I was one of six women.
Whoa.
Wow.
One of six women. So at that point, I was like, oh, okay, is this what the
This is-
music industry is like?
Oh yeah. And the other side, so did you not want to do the performing side of things? Had you kind of
Well,
moved past that?
I had been when I was doing my degree, which I did actually back in Newcastle. I was working with a composer then. We were we worked together for at least a year. I recorded a double album and some limited edition singles, and sort of did some gigs and stuff with him, and that was really great. We had a good partnership, and I tried to sort of make new connections when I was in London, but it was very hard trying to, as a working class woman with no sort of savings or money or anything, to find those new connections. It took me a little while,
Mm.
while I was more concerned with paying my rent, and I knew that spending my days recording with somebody wasn't going to be paying my rent, so I had to focus on that first of all.
Yeah.
I did end up, it was actually after my children were born. I did end up singing with the London Bulgarian choir for about
Wow.
6 or 7 years. So I
Wow.
end I ended up having to put my sort of performing career to one side while I prioritized earning a living.
And so you okay, so then you prioritized, and then how did you what happened when you stepped out of, what was it, MVE?
Yeah, so I ended up doing a bit more interesting work after that. I'd sort of, started to build up some connections by that point, and I ended up working at the Royal Festival Hall in the classical music department.
Okay, so I want to pause there because so many people say, like, how do I get into this industry? My first answer, the first thing I always say is, what do you think this industry is? Because a lot of people have this like very different idea of what the music industry is. And one of my older sister, one of her friends said it really, really well, who was in a well-known band at the time, and he said, being in the music industry is like jumping out of a plane, and then but working in the industry, like going for the industry is like jumping out of the plane, and working in the industry is realizing you don't have a parachute. And it was such a perfect way of doing it, because people are like, I'm going to be a superstar, and then they jump and it's great, and they go, oh my gosh, all of this stuff is, this is reality, oh shit. But a lot of people ask me when I do mentoring and career coaching for individuals, how do I make these connections? You said, oh, I made these connections at this point. I got this job at this point. And that's a real sticking point for a lot of people. What did you do that separated you from other people to get these jobs? Like, what were you studying? How were you behaving? How did you stand out and navigate? And I think prioritization is a massive thing, and having a focus and knowing what you need, what your main purpose is, if it was money or if it's, trying to get seniority or what. But what was your impetus, and how did you actually do it?
So I got my job in the record stores by walking through Camden and seeing the sign stuck on the window. And actually, I'll always remember the sign said, "Left field music graduates wanted." And I thought, that's got my name written on it. So that's how I got that job. Oh, and I also need to tell you, I ended up sort of being assistant to the HR manager there, looking after all of the 120 staff. But the first person I interviewed and gave a job was a man called Zane Lowe, who is now the top the
Wow.
top Apple Beats DJ. So
Wow.
the Camden store was just around the corner from MTV, and he'd been working in Camden for about six months when he moved. He'd obviously got an invite from MTV, but he'd literally only just arrived in London three days when I interviewed him, and I knew then he had something special. I was like, this guy's amazing. So
That's amazing.
how do people get their jobs? So I moved on to the Royal Festival Hall because I ended up doing some temping.
Okay.
So I left MVE. Um, I met some lovely, wonderful people, some people who are still my closest friends now. But I realized that it wasn't working in a secondhand record store, and it wasn't quite fulfilling my ambitions. I needed to move on. So I just registered with lots of temping agencies, and the two things that got me work was, one, I had a degree by that
Mm.
by that point, and two, I could type.
Wow.
And the agencies back then, you know, they were very, I would say, misogynistic in their attitudes, and this was the women who were running these agencies. But what the careers advice I was given from one woman, which I've never forgotten, is she said, I'm going to give you some advice. You know, what you need to do is wear lots of makeup, wear a short skirt, and smile a lot. That was her
career. To be a woman.
Her career advice.
That makes me think of Wolf on Wall Street. Like
in temping agencies, and you know, so I did lots of really crappy little assignments for a week here and a week there, but it got me experience. And then finally I got in with some really good creative industry focused agencies. Okay. And they started putting me into some really interesting environments. And one of my favorite assignments was at the Royal Festival Hall.
So what kind of assignments would you work on? What would be an example?
Well, I started off doing non-creative assignments, so you know, just general administrative support for law firms, international law firms, stockbroking companies, and things like that, which I really hated. Hated. Loathed with my body. In fact, the only way I could get through it was to pretend that I was an undercover journalist, and I was an investigative journalist, and I was gonna find out their secrets, and you know, that was my assignment. That was mentally the only way I could get through it.
I love that. How to play the game. It's literally how to play the game with Vick Bain. That's what it is. Just going back to what you said, though, what's really interesting is that I've had this conversation a lot this week. A lot of people are like, here are my restrictions. Here are the restrictions. This is the cage that I'm in. And I understand that everyone has these really systemic.
Explain that. What do you mean these are the restrictions?
So when I've had a conversation with someone who said there's COVID restrictions, which means I can't do this the way that I want to do it. I have, being a woman in the industry means I don't get these opportunities. This is what my restriction looks like. I have socioeconomic barriers to entry. This is what that looks like. What I love about what you just said, Vic, is you explained those barriers and then explained how you gamed them and was like, okay, if you want me to wear lots of makeup and smile a lot, then I am going to do that, but pretend that I'm an investigative journalist and get further along. And I think that's a really important point to kind of bold and underline is whatever your restrictions to whatever your career seem to be, there are some things that, well, most things, all the things, everything we cannot control, but knowing what they are and then knowing how you can use them to your advantage and game that system is going to give you a totally different perception of how to navigate the industry, rather than like Raquel, why we're sitting here today and being like, we don't like this. We're not allowed into the same rooms. So let's own what we are allowed to do, which is look fabulous, drink mimosas, have conversations, and we're gonna super extra do that. And we're gonna use it to our advantage. Do you know what I mean? And I think that's what, when people talk about their careers, I really want people to understand that bit that you said, Vic, about how you chose to see what reality was, learn how to type, which to me is today's version of learn social media. If you can be a good social media person, or you have these like XYZ skills that are the equivalent of, building a website, what typing was before, know what those things are. If you really want to work in any industry, know what the boring jobs are that people want other people to do.
Yeah, I think it actually comes back to a level of resiliency. So being able to accept that for a time you're going to have to do the dirty work that you hate. Yeah. And the reality is, in every industry, there's going to be jobs you hate with a passion, and you have to get through it.
Ones. Yeah, stereotyped ones, right? It's like, oh, we're the women, and what you and I used to do. It's like, oh, we're the ones that coordinate all the things. We're the ones that are putting this stuff together.
But yeah.
Really?
No, I was in marketing. But
you probably still had to deal with the projects with like, you still have to do a level of project coordination and sort of like managing the team of people.
Yeah, a little bit. I think for me, it was a bit of a different world. I was more on like the management level, but I was kept down because I was the only woman on the management level. So it was like kind of in title, I was that, but then constantly kind of brought down. So that was my situation. But I think what I want to know is, okay, so you were like, I have to play in the mud for a bit because I have to pay my bills and that sucks, but I'm going to do it. Okay, so we're at that point. What I want to know is how you were able to turn that into good connections, how you were able to turn that into your favor. So Christina and I did that by making these events. What did you do? How did you turn those kind of, for lack of a better word, crappy jobs into something that was going to work for you?
I think, well, I had a bit of a curveball in that, just at that point, just as my career was really getting going, and I was working in a wonderful music venue, assisting the programmers, and I was having a great time. And then I found out I was pregnant with twins, and then my partner decided to bow out disgracefully, so I was left on my own
Disgracefully.
with two babies in London. So I had a bit of a curveball in that. Then I had to focus on them, and how we were going to survive on our own. But that also gave me a little bit of brain space to really think about how I was going to restore my career and get back on track. And it took a little while. It took 2 years, but then I had a friend who approached me and said, I'm going to set up a business with a few other people doing visuals, audio visuals for bands on tour and DJ nights and so on. He said, I need somebody to help do be an office manager, and can you do accounts? And I said, oh yeah. I said, I can do that.
Could you?
No. No. So I had 1 day training with an accountant on how to use an accounting package. and that was it, basically. So
yeah, I'm an accountant now, pretty much.
So it was managing the finances for a startup business. And I just taught myself as I went, and I sort of got advice from other friends who had set up their own businesses. I got some training from HMRC, who Christina might know, it's Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs. So I got some training from the Queen's tax inspectors, and basically just cracked on.
I love that you did. I could just imagine them like picking up the phone. You'd be like, I need help. What? I need you to teach me how to do everything. You have 20 minutes.
They were really helpful, actually.
I bet they were.
They want people to pay tax. So so
it's already their job. Like normally they're probably chasing after people who are like, I don't like you, I don't want to do this. Whoever was on the other end of that call, it's like, yeah, the equivalent of the CRA. Like imagine picking up the phone and someone being like, I have some questions. They'd be like, oh, what a delight.
Yeah. They were so helpful. I think at one point one of them came out and did an office visit. Yeah, I think they just couldn't believe that. It's like, teach me how to pay tax. They were really
they were like, this is our dream come true. Oh, that's so great.
But it was fantastic experience, and it really surprised me with my sort of very creative theatre and drama and music background, that I really it just clicked into place. Oh wow, I can, I came from a poor working class background. I knew how to manage money. So
What a power that is.
that transferable skill, I was like, yeah, I can help your business keep its cash flow going, because that's what I do in my life every day as a single mum. So
Yeah, that I love that transferability. Those transferable skills, once you highlight them and you know them, you're so much more empowered, right? Even if you're not aware at the time, it just, as you get on in your career, you start to honor those transferable things, and that's really what helps you to stand out. But I'm just wondering why you said yes to a startup. Like, that's a massive risk to take on. If I had that situation, I don't know why I wouldn't just go into a safe, secure job that would give me benefits, and that kind of like, oh, you didn't hide, you had all of these things against you, and then you took a massive risk with a startup for a position that you didn't know how to do. What were you thinking?
It was the only offer on the table, to be honest. You know, as a single mum, and I still at that point hadn't had any childcare sorted out. I had, it was sort of chicken and egg. I really wanted to get back into work, but I didn't know who would take a risk on with me.
Okay.
So it was a friend who I really valued, and actually he grew his business fantastically, and it became a business called United Visual Artists, and they are international leaders in what they do now. But I sort of helped him at the very, very start, and
Wow.
it gave me enough experience on my CV that I ended up growing very quickly a full-time business, freelancing, doing financial management for small creative businesses. So it just sort of grew.
I
Because
love
everyone needs their money looked after.
Yeah.
And creatives don't generally like to do that.
I was literally just gonna say, Raquel is like, oh, I will tell you. I will tell you. Yeah,
I know this.
Yeah. Yeah, and not just because of me. That I love that. There's an analogy that I've been using in Music BC. I'm one of the consultants for this Jumpstart Consulting, and a program, that the pilot that they have. And it's a 1-hour consultation with anyone who wants to learn more about the music industry, wherever they're at in their career. One of the recurring themes I've been saying is so many creatives want to change the tide. They literally want to change the tide instead of building a surfboard and going with the biggest wave. And I think...
Explain that.
Yeah, I will. One of the things that what I mean is, people would say to me, I just want to get to this position or this point or this stage. I just want to be this person. I want to be an artist in this way. And what I've said to them is, I work in the industry. I work in the entertainment industry, intentionally 50% in front of and 50% behind the lens. What that looks like is not up to me. My job, and Raquel, you and I do this all the time, we talk about how do we become an athlete in our industry, not how do we run after one singular role, because you can't control that. And so I think a lot of this myth is, oh, I want to work in the music industry, but I want to be the lead singer on this band at these festivals. And it's like saying, I want to be a dentist, but I only want to extract the left molar. Like, you have to deal with the other teeth also. You might not like the other teeth. The other teeth might not be extractable as easily. But the point is, when you stop thinking about trying to change the tide and you start thinking, how do I build a basis that I can ride whatever wave comes at me? That's when you get to play in the music and creatives or any industry and win. And the reason I'm saying that is because, Vic, that's exactly what you did. You went into something and said, okay, I've got to do this out of a real need to get this done. But then you started an entire business based on what you've realized you were good at and what was currently required in the industry, the biggest pain point that a lot of people felt that you knew you could serve. And I think that gets you further, faster. It might not be what you think is your ultimate outcome and your ultimate goal, but it will get you into what you said, Vic, into environments where you're surrounded by people who are operating at that same level as you are. So you have to know what you love the most, but you also have to know what you're the best at and what people will pay you the most for. And I think you did that really well, Vic.
Yes, thank you. I mean, it's certainly, it wasn't as strategic or intentional when, when I was making those decisions, but that's what manifested. That's what happened, and I realized, I mean, in my early 20s, I didn't say, do you know what, I'm gonna start doing financial management and accounts. That would have been the complete opposite of what I wanted to do. But I really discovered that I had a knack for it, and as long as I was working in a creative environment, that's what mattered most to me.
Mm-hmm.
So my clients were this audiovisual company, architects, designers, songwriters, theatre companies, all of these very, very creative people. And quite often I was helping them save their businesses because a lot of businesses who would get me in were struggling with their financial management and cash flow processes. So I was able to go in and troubleshoot and set them up and bring other staff in to keep them going. And I really enjoyed that. It was exciting, and it was busy, and it was a lot of my clients. I was based in Old Street, Christina. I don't know if you remember the Old Street area. They called it Silicon Roundabout because of all of the IT tech startups which sprang up in the early noughties around that time. And then one of my financial clients became BASCA, the British Academy of Songwriters, Composers and Authors. So
wow, that's
happened.
How you went. Okay.
Yeah, in 2005.
Wow. So now we're gonna arrive at this other juicy part where you arrived at BASCA and you started working. I guess you eventually started working there. The inequality in terms of the gender differences, like just paint this picture for all of these people who might not work in the creative industries, but they are also probably in super misogynistic spaces, because probably is the unfortunate word that I'm using right now, because it still happens more often than we like. Paint me the picture of what BASCA was like.
I would say, so it was an organization that originally set up in the late 1940s, and it was almost like going back there. The customs and the rituals and the people who were involved, and it was very, very old fashioned. The CEO at the time was a lovely man called Chris Green. He was very lovely, but it was a different era and a different pace, and yeah, I mean, I can remember reading some diversity statistics, maybe 2007, and sort of bringing it up at the board and asking about the diversity statistics in that organization, and people were just shocked. I mean, really shocked. Like, what? There's no problems here. There's no discrimination here. And at that time, I mean, for a good my first 8 years there was only one woman on the board that whole time. And interestingly enough, because I won't name her name, but she was the one who really opposed my being promoted up. Funnily enough, but yeah, there was only ever one woman on the board in that whole time.
So is that when you started digging into your thesis? Because your thesis goes into barriers of success for women in the music industry. And I'm really curious what came out of that. And I'm curious what kind of triggered you wanting to study that.
Well, it was definitely my whole career experiences really informed that. But yes, at BASCA I had lots of inspiration. It was really studying for my MBA. So they asked me in 2008. So I originally went in as a part-time financial controller while I had lots of other freelance clients as well. So I worked there part-time for 3 years. In 2008, they asked me if I would work full-time and be their chief operations officer. And I said only if I had time off to study for an MBA as well, which they agreed. So I was doing this MBA, just very, very part time, and my dissertation for that ended up being an investigation into the attitudes towards equality and diversity from UK music industry employers. I was really interested in the understanding of the statistics, understanding of discrimination, and how that impacted on their staff teams, the diversity demographic statistics on their staff teams. And there was a lot of denial, a lot of anger when you sort of brought up when I brought up those topics. But it really it instigated in me a desire to learn more, a respect for empirical evidence informing your campaigning. So, one of the main things that running an organization like that, or any membership organization in any sector, you campaign and you lobby to make things better for your members. Now, in order to do that, you have to have really good evidence. You can't just have an opinion if you're lobbying at government level. You have to have evidence. Where are your facts? What's your evidence to back up you're wanting that policy change? So I really was sort of very motivated to find out more about the diversity in music statistics, of which there was very little at that point 10 years ago. But I ended up somehow being promoted to CEO, and I couldn't do any studying while I was doing that. That job was so big, I had to fully focus on that.
Wow. And so with that, because you started on that, so did you have findings, or did you kind of end that before? Because I'm curious, were you looking more in front of the lens, behind I guess it's music, so it's in front of the mic, behind the mic. And what were what was it leading towards? What were you seeing?
So that initial report, which I guess I finished 10 years ago. I finished my MBA in 2012, so nine years ago. Yeah, and the findings were that the more receptive the employers of the music businesses were towards equality and diversity issues, the more diverse their staff teams were. So it was really, really important and vital that leaders and senior managers of music businesses embraced equality and diversity issues in order for them to have a positive impact on the demographics of their staff teams, and generally be more positive. So I know it sounds really obvious, but making that link is very important, because that you know where it starts. How do you impact change in the music industry? You have to get the CEOs and the leaders on side.
It's so we talk about this a lot in when I was on the board for Music BC, and with a lot of the advocating that we do in this province as well. It's not just in the music industry, but in the creative and tech industries. We're having representation at board level, and having training, coaching, mentoring. A friend of mine, Vivian Chan, and I are talking a lot about this. She came up with a whole list of statistics about how many women, how many people of color are in, and people who are marginalized, gender and culturally, are actually in board positions and in senior level positions. And I think that really is such a massive part of systemic change, is actually getting people feeling comfortable in a position of leadership. And Vic, this was one of my big things, is when I grew up into this industry, I was told you're either a performer or you're working in the music industry. And I was actually really afraid to take jobs. I remember I applied once to an administrative assistant position in the music industry. It was either for BASCA or the PRS, or it was something, and I was so afraid that they would see how well I would file and organize things and never let me get out of that job. Because I had the opposite thing to you. I was like, I want to be an artist, so I can't get stuck in a record label doing admin or other things or business related things, because if once you're in front of those people, they have the power to stop you from doing other things. And if you don't continue to work for them, again, this is part of the misogynistic kind of very scared, like fear-based mindset of like, you can't leave now. We like you in this position, so you better not go. And so when, fast forward 5 years, I joined the board of Music BC. I was one of the only women at the time. The executive director who's in place now was not. She was working. She was a project manager for the company. And I remember asking a question about what the responsibilities were before I stepped up to join the board. And actually, it was one of the men in the industry who had suggested that I put my hand up and join the board. And the person in charge, I won't name any names, but the response was, if you don't know how to be on a board, Google it. And I was floored. I was just like, and so I spent the first year on that board. I got voted in because it's a public vote, or a member vote. I was voted in, and I spent the first year not asking any questions because I just thought that I was the stupidest person in that room. And the reality was, after the second year and I started asking questions, I was like, oh, no one knows what's going on. No one has the answer. These are not stupid questions. And then there was no stopping me, but it took me a long time.
I want to know. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, and I think it's been shown that men take other men under their wing, and mentor and prepare them much better than women are prepared.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, absolutely. What is the F list? Can you explain it?
The F list music directory is a very comprehensive list of female musicians who are based in the UK, and it's only UK focused because otherwise it would take up more
all of the internet.
Oh my goodness me, yes, it would be, so I'm having to keep it focused, although I've advised people in other countries how to set up their own. But so at the minute it is we've just turned a year old. We launched a year ago and had some fantastic publicity on in fact, I was interviewed, I don't know if you remember the Today program on Radio 4, Christina. So I was interviewed on the Today program, which was incredible. And I was working with a musician called Anushka Shankar, who is Ravi Shankar's daughter, who is an incredible Grammy Award-winning musician in her own right. So she was our president for the first year. We just made a press release announcement yesterday. Our second president is a sort of indie post-punk rock guitarist called Brick Smith. So she performed. She's from California originally, but she worked and performed in a very iconic indie band called The Fall, who maybe maybe indie fans in other countries might have heard of them. But she's just an amazing woman. She's in her 50s now, and she's still recording and releasing music, which I think just is amazing. It kicks ass, her music. So she's going to help us this next year, and it's a not-for-profit organization that gives visibility to female musicians, because I was sick of reading in newspaper adverts, festival promoters in particular saying, well, we would book more women onto our stages, but we've asked them all.
Everyone.
Oh, have you?
All of them.
All of them.
All things like, well, just women don't play guitars, or women just need to join bands a bit, a bit more. And I was Neil Portnow, who was then CEO of the Grammys, who said women just need to step up a bit more, and he lost his job because of that speech he gave at the Grammys. But by saying to those people, well, actually, I've got this really incredible, freely, publicly searchable database here with over 5,000 female musicians from all genres of music who've got all sorts of skills and experience. So you can find incredible musicians there, and they're all here, and you certainly haven't asked them all.
I love that. I love that you were just like, oh, you said you have a problem? Oh, let me fix that for you then.
Yeah.
Now what's
And
the
if so,
problem?
I'd like to see the paper trail of the 5,000 that you've asked and all said no.
Oh.
Yeah, I mean, people say that in newspaper interviews, like, there's just not that pool of women there. We can't find them, blah blah blah. It's like, that's just a load of rubbish. Here they all are. So the directory is being used by radio station DJs and women in music podcasters, music journalists, other musicians who want to find other musicians, festival bookers and promoters, talent spotters, because this is a live growing database every single day since it was launched in this version a year ago. Every single day, women and bands with women in them have created listings and uploaded their music onto the site. And I'm just so proud of it.
I love that across the board. Like, I think every industry should have lists, because I think a lot of times people have these really homogenous companies. Maybe they want to make them more diverse, but maybe they truly don't have those connections and they don't know where to find people. And so to have these directories, I think that's such a great idea.
Yeah. And as we move more into hybrid working, remote working, reducing kind of geographical barriers, which is certainly not all of the systemic barriers. That's not solving all the problems, but it's starting to allow people the ability to get to know people who are from different walks. And so it just starts to kind of normalize that someone outside of your circle is just as much a candidate, which I think those old boys clubs, like, we talk about a lot of these things, especially now with pandemic, as our friend Donna calls it, with pandemic, you have a lot of people who are feeling really isolated, but at the same time, there are a lot of people who can connect outwards of their own circles now. So
yes, but I think also, like, I'm just thinking about this is what's sinking into my head right now, is how many companies hire through the circles of who they know.
Yeah, that's and that's,
you know what I mean? They're not
shifting.
just hiring, right? But it's not even like a lot of those, it's the hidden job market. A lot of those job openings aren't actually going out. They're not even bringing in resumes from people everywhere, right? So a lot of times those jobs are being filled by my friend's cousin, or the guy down the street who knows a friend who does that job. And that's I don't really have a problem with that, but I think if you're trying to create diversity within your company, which is such a superpower, and we've seen that now, and there's research out now that shows that, then I think it can be a good starting point, at least, to dip your toe and to be able to pull people and find people from different walks of life if you're not seeing that. And a lot of times also, people aren't always outgoing in the age where they're hiring, right? Like, a lot of times people kind of start siloing themselves off. They have their friends, they have their kids, they have all of these things, and they start just living their life in this one
Bubble.
pillar. Bubble. Yeah.
Monstrous word.
Bubble. Bubble is a better word. But yeah. After COVID, I just don't want to say the word bubble anymore.
That word ever. No one.
But yeah, right. So I think to have this, it's a good starting point. I don't think it's the end all be all, but I think it's a perfect, really awesome starting point for people to start looking outside of their circles.
Yeah.
Genius.
And Vic, when you did it, I think what strikes me a lot is how focused you are about it. And I think that's the other thing, is a lot of people are like, hey, I'm going to start this thing because I don't like this problem in society. But what you've done is you have a background in continuous learning, development, education, research. So you understood the chain of events that could happen by this one thing. And I think that's one of the issues that we're having in the industry, certainly in the music industry. It's a conversation I've had with our friend Ian Cromwell a lot, where there are a lot of silos being perpetuated and fractures that are being perpetuated by people who don't know what else exists. And so they're starting new things. And that is just the same as posting on social media to air your grievances. Nothing happens. It just dissolves into nothing. And you either do it with your little group of people. If you've created a little collective, you do it, but you don't grow, and you don't then start to actually harbor big influence. And I think the F list is a really important answer to a statement that was being made, right? And I think that's a massive thing. So that deep response and saying, well, actually, we've created this because this is the thing that we've heard from everyone in this country about why the reasons you think women are not on these stages. Here is your answer. Now, what are you going to do? It's a chess move. Like Vic's just like, yes. Am I hitting that nail on the head, Vic?
Absolutely. I really like the idea, of giving the industry positive solutions. This is the answer. Here it is. I've given you a tool. I really like the idea of positive action, because with all of my research, which I've published, I really felt like I made, well, if not enemies, I think some people stopped being my friend when I was publishing some statistics, because I was holding a mirror up to the music industry and showing them statistics that they didn't like. So I was giving them bad news. So I think for a while people were like, oh, Vick Bain, she's just giving people bad news. But then it was such a pleasure to say, oh, but now actually I've got a solution.
Yeah. You went from being like Vick Bad News Bain to Vick the Solver Bain.
So yeah, that was quite an interesting. It's been much more pleasurable to work on the solutions than give people the dire statistics.
Well, and you've done it with such grace, because I have to say, even from when I first met you, surrounded by, and again, I don't want to paint this picture in the worst light, but it's like you're surrounded by all men in a position of authority. And I've met other women who have been in this industry. Raquel and I have spoken about this multiple times, about people who have gone to play in the boys' club and become one of the boys in order to do that. And I don't think there is anything wrong with that. I think that is a personal choice. And I think people have to survive in order to thrive the way that they see fit. But I've also had conversations with those same women who tell me really misogynistic things because that's what they've learned. They've learned how to behave in that way, and they are perpetuating the old boys club mentality. And so it's very selective, it's very exclusive. It's, we were talking before that we started recording about why we started Bombshell Brunches, and the fact that the two rules are no networking and no cliques, because we don't want people to feel the way that we were made to feel, or the way that we ended up feeling. So what what was it? And when I met you, I was like, this person is not being, you're not treating me like a man treats me. You're not, even though, like, because there are a lot of women who would look at me and say, well, you're not a pop star, you're not dancing enough, you're not doing this, you should do this, this is how you should learn how to type, you should be a typer, you know. These are, wear makeup, smile more. That's the way it is, because that's what I had to do, and you never did that. So what do you think it was about, like, what do you think it is about you that kept your integrity as you were becoming a leader?
I think my background has always kept me humble. My working class roots, you know, my family would never let me get away with behaving in that sort of way. So yeah, so that wasn't my strategy, but I understand, you know, I come across women who do behave like that, and that's fine. That has been their survival mechanism, becoming one of the lads, and that's, you know, and that's a sort of a recognized technique. But yeah, that was never part of my makeup. So I, you know, and I've also always really enjoyed working with women in particular. So most of my work nowadays, and certainly with the F list, is with lots and lots of women, and I just love it. It's a different vibe, a different culture, a different feeling to the whole initiative, and it's been one of the most rewarding. I mean, certainly not financially, because it's a not-for-profit thing, but you know, but emotionally and spiritually, it's been one of the most rewarding projects I've ever done in my life. It's been a lot of fun, and we're just really motivated by doing the right thing, helping other women helping other women.
I have a couple rapid questions right before we finish, because I know we're going a little bit over, but what does leading like a woman look like to you?
Well, I guess there's, you know, there's different viewpoints about this. I mean, I guess I should also explain what my PhD is, because that puts some context to it. So I started my PhD two years ago, and it's looking at women's careers in the music industry. So it's informed by careers theory. I'm doing a lot of reading around that. You know, why do women have the careers that they do? What does that look like? How are they different from men, with a particular focus through the lens of music? And I'm looking at both creative careers and business careers. So what does female leadership look like? Well, lots of people say that, you know, well, women are much more emotional, much more about people. They've got better communication skills. This is why they need to work in HR and marketing and all of those sorts of female roles. Whereas men, well, you know, they're much more stronger and assertive, and you know, that's so men, you know, men make better managers of people, because they're tougher, and you know, there are certain qualities that are then essentialized as male, and so actually I don't really believe that female leadership is a thing in the same way that male leadership is a thing. We can both embrace these qualities of being male and female, and bring, you know, I really think that we all, men and women and all of those people in between, we, you know, we need to embrace all of these qualities in a different sort of patchwork, really. So, you know, if you think that you know, you need to work a bit more on your empathy, then do that. But you can be a man or a woman who needs to work on your empathy, or maybe you do need to work a bit more on your assertiveness. And again, men or women can need to work on that. So yeah, I think I've sort of stepped back from saying there's a particular model for female leaders, because we should be embracing all of these qualities.
I love that. We talk about mixing feminine and masculine energy a lot. Yeah. Yeah.
That's it.
Finally, how can women be better at holding the door open for other women?
Yeah, I mean, that's the joy of my not-for-profit organization. It's an opportunity for women to help other women. And actually, on my website, I've got a page called Sister Organizations, and there's now about 60 organizations or projects, charities, or initiatives that I've come across that help and campaign for better diversity in music. Most of them are focused on women, but some of them look at ethnic diversity, some of them look at disability, and socioeconomic background, and so on. So I think for women to get involved in those sorts of projects can really help women to help other women.
Strength in
I love
numbers.
it.
Strength in numbers. Well, Vic, thank you so much. This has been so inspiring, so entertaining, and I love that, again, just meeting someone like you who talks about being told to wear makeup and smile more, to being someone who is, one of the most influential women in music, and one of the most influential people, because look at what you're doing. You're bringing people together with a very strong focus. And I think that it's so transferable to all creative and other industries. I think you've been an incredible beacon and a shining light for success for marginalized people all around the world.
Amazing. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening, Bombshells. In order to continue to elevate, subscribe and don't forget to click that little bell so you can get notified every time we have a new badass brunch. Until next time, stay focused, fierce, and fabulous.